was just sitting there like, did that just really happen? As you can see, this is the final countdown. I am here. We did choose an elective induction because of the coronavirus and all that. We don't want to be in the hospital when this stuff reaches its peak. So we're inducing now, and it's crazy because I was just informed that I've been having contractions all day, and I am 2 centimeters dilated, and yesterday I was 0 centimeters dilated. I woke up at 8 in the morning and I thought I just had to poop. And I come here and they said I've been having contractions and I'm 2 centimeters. So I'm excited. Hopefully that means she'll be here soon. So I'll keep you updated. So as of right now, my contractions feel like a mixture of a period cramp and I really have to poop cramp. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say they're about a 4, 4.5. They're tolerable, they're just very annoying. Also, my head's kind of starting to hurt a bit, so. And what else? Oh, my nurse has propped me on my side because laying on your back isn't good for the baby. So those are the updates. It's been about 45 minutes since I started the induction, so we're off to a great start. I am fully dilated, but my baby girl has not dropped all the way yet, so we're just waiting for her to finish dropping and then I can start pushing. So hopefully that happens soon because I got the epidural. Probably got the epidural at 2 a.m. so 4 hours ago, and then that was right before I started Pitocin and right after I finished the Cyrotec. I think that's the name of it. It was something they put in to ripen my cervix. So I got the epidural right in between those 2 medicines, so I didn't feel, and when I got the epidural I was about 3 or 4 centimeters dilated and my water had broken on its own, which I was happy about. So yeah, so in those 4 hours I went from 3 or 4 centimeters to fully dilated. So I am feeling a lot of pressure to push, but I can't push because it's not dropped, so that's really uncomfortable. I keep pushing this button for more epidural, but like I'm not feeling pain, but I'm feeling a lot of pressure, and I guess that's normal for the epidural. So yeah, that is where I'm at right now. And someone's coming in, so I'll be back later. When my baby girl was born, they placed her on my chest. She was extremely blue. At the time, I did not think that she was blue. I thought that possibly she was very dark skinned, and her cry was very, very soft. So my doctor said that if her cry did not get louder, she would have to call the NICU in. At this time, my brain is not comprehending what she is saying because I'm just in shock of what's going on. Like, there's a human being on my chest that just came out of my vagina. Like, what just happened? And now you're telling me that her cry isn't loud enough and you have to call the NICU? Like, what? So my brain was just taking a slow time to really compute everything. And eventually the NICU, well, not eventually, it happened very fast. The NICU was immediately called and they came in very swiftly. They did some work on her there. They got her cry to be definitely louder, but still not where they needed it to be. And they took her down to the NICU unit. And that was that. She went down to the NICU. Her dad went down to the NICU with her. All the doctors left. And I was just sitting there like, did that just really happen? So they allowed me to go see her before they transferred me to a recovery room, and she was just hooked up to all these wires, and she had a tube down her throat and oxygen on her nose, and it was really crazy to see. I just couldn't believe that that was happening, you know, because it was just shocking. It was still really shocking for me to think about. So they allowed me to go see her, and then they wheeled me down to a recovery room. And after that, had to, I don't know if this is because of the coronavirus. Actually, it was because of the coronavirus. There could only be one parent in the NICU at a time. So her father and I couldn't be with her as a family unit. It had to just be me or him. So when he came back, I went down. They brought me in a pump to my recovery room so I could give breast milk for her. Eventually, I did get to try to breastfeed her. I believe it was the next day after she was born, the next morning. So that was nice, and then I got to hold her, and that whole second day, yes, so I gave birth, and the next day, that second day, I was just running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to the NICU because they wanted me to try to breastfeed her every couple of hours. And the doctor had came in earlier that day and said that, hey, you know, try to push yourself today, see just how much you can do, you know, don't try to take it too easy. So I was like, okay, cool. And at the time I was feeling fine. So I was just running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And girl, when I woke up the next day, I was so swollen and in so much pain, but it was worth it because I got to see my baby girl a lot that day, and each day she got better. I believe they started her oxygen on about 60%, and by the second day she was on 20%, so that was really, really great. She's such a little fighter. They said that probably the reason for her not being able to breathe too well when she first came out was because my delivery was very fast, because I just was so terrified of feeling anything. I was like, oh my God, I just want to get this over with. I was giving like monstrous pushes. Like she was out in 29 minutes. And apparently during quick births, it has the same effects as a C-section. So she just didn't have time to adapt from being inside of the placenta and being outside. Like there was just no like adjustment period for her. She was just boom, she was out in the world. So apparently when things happen quick like that, it can lead to respiratory distress, which is what happened to my baby. And they also think that she might have either swallowed some of my amniotic fluid, or they believe that she had a lung infection. They gave her antibiotics just in case. So she was on those, and she was on oxygen. And 2 days after my delivery, we had to be discharged, her father and I. However, she could not be discharged at the time. They were just back and forth a lot with how long she would have to stay in the NICU. They were saying it could either be the next day or it could be 2 or 3 days from now. So we were really upset that we couldn't bring her home, and it was really, really, really sad. We cried on the way back home, and when I got home is when it actually really hit me that my baby came out not breathing well. She was breathing, but she wasn't breathing well. And the whole time I was in the hospital, you know, I've just trained my brain to be very mentally strong. So I always try to think of the positive. I was like, oh, this is fine, she'll be okay. I was really letting it sink in. And when I got home and she wasn't there and she was still in NICU, I was just like, wow, like this is real. And I just broke down. And that was the first time I really let myself feel what was happening. And by the grace of God, she was able to come home the next day, thankfully. However, we did not know that. So I pumped that night and we brought it to her in the morning. I just thought that I was just going to be a normal visit, stay with her for a few hours, feed her, hold her, stuff like that. But as soon as I got there, they're like, yeah, so she's probably gonna be coming home today. And I was like, what? And the doctor came in and she told me that everything was looking really great. Her breathing was great. They tested her blood. She didn't really have signs of an infection anymore, and she was good to come home. And I was just like, yo, this is crazy. baby. And I was just so thankful, because I know so many NICU parents don't have that experience. Like, their baby doesn't just spend 3 days in the NICU and come home. There's babies that spend months there. In fact, right next to my daughter, there was a baby that looked to be like 1 pound. And it was just so sad to see it. And the baby was so strong. Like, he was so strong. The nurses just kept commenting on how well he was doing. And I was just like, wow, like, I was really sad that my daughter was in there. At the same time, I was just so grateful that the reason why she was in there was something that was able to be fixed fairly quickly. And man, it's just really sad to think about. It's really sad to think about. So yeah, that was my NICU experience. Yeah, that was my NICU experience. So we brought her home and everything was awesome. We were bonding with her. Okay, I'm not gonna say everything was awesome. I really think that I had a bit of postpartum depression those first couple days we brought her home. Like, I was just crying randomly and I just was not happy. I am a bit of a perfectionist, so it was really making me angry that I could not figure out like what her cries meant, and I didn't know how to really soothe her, and I barely knew how to change a diaper. So it was just really stressful, and on top of that, I was feeling awful. I was having shortness of breath. Every time I tried to lay down to go to sleep at night, I would feel sharp pains, like sharp shooting pains going up towards my lungs. My swelling it got a little better. I read online that you're swelling from pregnancy because, you know, all those fluids that your body's been holding on to, plus the fluids from the epidural built up. It's normal to have swelling after pregnancy. However, it's supposed to like at least start going away after a week, and it had been a week postpartum for me, and I was still super swollen, and my face was super swollen, my neck was swollen, everything was swollen, especially my feet, like my toes. My butt was swollen. My butt was so it was weird. And so I called my doctor just to make sure that everything was normal, you know, because I just felt so awful. And she called me back and she told me to come in because I needed to get my blood pressure checked. So I went in and the nurse checked my blood pressure like 4 times. And she was like, this is pretty high. And in my mind, I'm like, what does that mean? So I went into the room and I waited for my doctor. She came in and she told me straight up, you know, you have preeclampsia, which is apparently very rare to get postpartum. Most women who get it, they get it during pregnancy. And so she pretty much told me that I had to be admitted into the hospital right away. And mind you, I had just went to this doctor's appointment thinking it was gonna be a regular doctor's appointment. I didn't have a hospital bag. I didn't even have a charger. I was not mentally prepared to be readmitted into the hospital. And I had a baby to take care of. And so I was just like, I started crying immediately. And she said that normally for preeclampsia, she likes to have her patients monitored in the hospital for at least 2 to 4 days. And I was like, what? And she said because I just had my baby, she wanted to get me back home to my baby. So she would try to get me in and out in 1 day. And then I would just have to like really rigorously monitor my blood pressure. And the thought of that was terrifying because I've never checked my blood pressure before. So it was just a lot going on. I was just so confused. Literally the same exact confusion as when my baby was taken away from me and taken to the NICU. I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't supposed to happen to me. So she was like, you need to go right now. So I just went downstairs. Her father and her were in the car. I was like, I have to be admitted into the hospital. I had pretty much like a breakdown, a mental breakdown. I thought I was about to die because she said that I had to do a 24-hour magnesium drip to make sure I didn't have a seizure. And I was like, what? I could have had a seizure? What? So I was just like, oh God, I was just so in shock. I was just crying and he was crying, and I was like, please just take care of our baby girl. And you know, I ended up staying in the hospital for 2 nights. They they wanted to let me go after the first night. However, I pushed to stay for the second night because I was terrified, you know, I was just terrified. I didn't feel comfortable going home and monitoring my blood pressure by myself. And my doctor was really okay with that. She was like, wait, that's great, as long as you want to stay. Like, she thought that I wanted to go back home to my baby, which I did, but I also want my health to be good, to be able to take care of her. So we both agreed that it would stress us both out way less if I would stay the second night. So the first night I was on the 24-hour magnesium drip, and they were monitoring my blood pressure every 30 minutes, and apparently it got really scary high. So I'm glad that I did make it to the hospital when I did, because I don't know what would have happened if my blood pressure was getting that high and I was just by myself at home. Also, my shortness of breath was still there. I had a tightness in my chest. I couldn't fully expand my chest. So they brought in an internist, and they said that I might have some type of lung infection. So they put me on antibiotics for that. They gave me blood pressure medicines. It was just a lot going on. Oh, and they gave me a pill to flush out my fluids because I was so disgustingly swollen. And thankfully it worked, because my feet are still a little swollen. I'm still a little swollen in bits and pieces, but I am like, if you were to just look at me, you would think that I was normal sized. So I'm very thankful for that. All in all, I'm thankful for that hospital stay because I was able to get diagnosed with whatever was wrong with my lungs. Yeah, I'm very thankful that I was able to get diagnosed with that. I'm very thankful that I was able to get diagnosed with the preeclampsia early on, like extremely early on, because I don't know what would have happened if I would have waited another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 6 weeks, you know, to really go to the doctor and get checked out. So yeah, the next day of my hospital stay, they took me off the IV. I was able to move around freely. They were monitoring the pressure every hour instead of every 30 minutes, except for a few times where it spiked. So they set it to like every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes to make sure everything was okay. And I was able to order a blood pressure cuff, which I now use 3 times a day to measure my blood pressure, which I report to my doctor, and she tells me whether or not to tweak my medicines that I'm taking. Right now, my blood pressure, the first day I got home, my blood pressure was very high and I was terrified. But now it's still high, but it's like on the lower side of high. So we're still tweaking my medicines a little bit, but I'm really happy that things are calming down with it. My doctor said hopefully her goal for me is for it to be cleared up by 6 weeks. So we're going to pray on that. And yeah, that is my labor and delivery story and part of my postpartum story. It has been a wild ride. I feel like this is so crazy because I had a relatively stress-free pregnancy and nothing really went wrong, and it's like post-pregnancy, all these things are going crazy with me. So but yeah, it's been a wild ride. I honestly it still hasn't fully settled into me, like everything that's happened, you know. But I'm just very thankful to be alive. I'm thankful that my baby girl is alive, and I'm thankful that we're able to finally be a family. If you have any questions, any suggestions for content you want to see, any similar stories, anything at all, any words of wisdom, please feel free to leave them in the comments and subscribe. And also, drum roll, let me show you my baby. This is her, my boo-boo. My baby Gia. But yes, so like I said, we will be, she's hungry. We will be making a lot more videos, so please stay tuned and subscribe, comment, like, all that good stuff, and we will see you later. Bye.